Let's head into what we have for all of you today. I'm excited for the show. John Daigle has a piece up on Rotoworld right now where he surveyed 10 high-stakes players. He surveyed 12 high-stakes fantasy players across our football world. Daigle, I love this column. It was fantastic nuggets. And this one focused on the 10 most overrated players in fantasy football this season. Picks, values, everything of the sort. I believe, Daigle, everyone graded 1 through 10, and then you compiled and sorted a list. Why don't you give us kind of an outline of how this came to be?
I have this conversation with Ian often that I think off-season pieces, like, yes, we still have to pay the rent with the bread and butter, like rankings and overrated, underrated, whatever. But I always like taking different approaches in the off-season. And during the draft, I remember reading, as I've done many years now, Bob McGinn's pieces. And then it kind of just hit me like, what if we apply this to fantasy? And when I read different things, that's how I always think, how can I turn this to where like people can use it actionably for fantasy? And so that's what I decided to do. Behind the scenes, I actually polled like 32 players, but kids and responsibilities, and essentially telling people, hey, can you do the work for me? And then I'll piece it together at the end. It's hard. I totally get it, which is why this may or may not become an annual series. But 12 were more than kind enough to shoot me answers. Some said, don't include me, leave me anonymous.
Right.
Some said, leave my comments out of there, but here's the point system you wanted. So whatever the case, Bob McGinn, what he does is polls like 10 to 17 execs every year on positions, and then they rank them 10 as their highest rated player down to 1, the lowest rated player at that position. And so I asked the guys that responded, can you rank the most overrated players on your list, 10 overall, 10 points, and then through 1, and then I'll compile all the points, and then we'll get back. And then I created this list of 10 players that based on their point systems.
Well, let's go through that list. Let's go 1 to 10. Not going to spend 15 minutes on each one, but we're going to hit on every single one of these players, each give a little tidbit. And I'm going to actually interject, and I'm sure Daigle will too, some thoughts that the column had as well. Okay, number 1, according to these 12 high-stakes fantasy players, the most overrated and overdrafted player in fantasy drafts right now is Kansas City rookie running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's going as the 27th overall player right now, around running back 15. One person you surveyed, Darren Armani, said his FFPC average draft position is out of control. Patrick Doherty, do you agree?
I mean, rookie running backs are not like one of those automatic fades, automatic busts. But that's kind of why they're so tough, because every year, there's usually 1 or 2 rookie running backs that kind of end up worthy of like a first or second round pick. Last year, Josh Jacobs obviously immediately established himself. But I think Clyde the Glide is kind of on like I would definitely approach with caution. I mean, this is a team that just won a Super Bowl with the full-blown committee at running back. And Andy Reid is not going to feel pressure to immediately make CEH an every down back. And, Clyde, early his career might not be he might not be amazing on early downs. He might take a little time to get up to the NFL level of ruggedness. I could see him, MJD, someone he's compared to sometimes, I think maybe by you, Josh, wasn't a 3-down back early in his career. He didn't grind it out early in his career. I wouldn't be surprised if he took a little time to maybe get up to NFL speed, NFL strength, especially in this like screwed up off season. Not the best circumstances for Clyde. But obviously the upside is self-evident. So I understand why people are taking the risk. But I definitely agree with the people that Daigle polled, and I'm more on kind of the caution side.
He led with 36 points. He made 3 people's first place vote. So that's 30 points off the bat right there. And everyone kind of made it clear they love the player, like they love his talent. It's just the fact that at this time of the year, everyone gets injected with that rookie fever. And so a mid-second round ADP, despite Damian Williams not being invisible, like he's still there, is what started worrying people.
I think when we call overrated or overdrafted, we have to kind of consider who else is being drafted around them at the time.
Mhm.
And so we mentioned it. It can be anywhere from 24 overall to 27 overall, but around that running back 15 mark, right before Clyde Edwards-Helaire right now is Kenyon Drake and Leonard Fournette, and right after him, are a bunch of questionable names. It's Todd Gurley, it's Jonathan Taylor, it's Melvin Gordon, it's Le'Veon Bell, it's Chris Carson. Maybe I'm crazy or just buying into this hype, but I'm totally cool with drafting Clyde Edwards-Helaire above all the names I just mentioned. Go through the list. Todd Gurley, his OC just came out and said, I have no idea how his knee is holding up right now. Jonathan Taylor is going to be splitting with Marlon Mack, who outproduced Damian Williams last season. Melvin Gordon is in a new situation and going to be splitting time with Phillip Lindsay. Le'Veon Bell was awful behind that offensive line last year. Chris Carson's coming off another injury. I can keep going down the list. So why not take the shot? And maybe, ADP-wise, it's about 3 or 4 or 5 spots above those other ones in terms of overall. But I'm totally cool with having him above those other quote-unquote veteran names.
I don't know if you're right or not, but I'm glad and I hope you stay on this podium by yourself all offseason. Because this is something you've said since the 1 a.m. podcast after round 1 was, no, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is an every down running back, immediately. So please stay there.
He is. And I understand, because this was another quote, that you're basically trying to hope that Clyde Edwards-Helaire has Kareem Hunt's rookie season of 325 touches, over 1,700 yards, and 11 touchdowns to return to value. And I understand that Brett Veach has said that Damian Williams is going to be involved as well. Okay, what is Brett Veach going to say? Is he going to say oh, no, actually, Damian Williams, you can just sit on the bench all season, and now we're just going to give the ball to Clyde Edwards-Helaire the entire time? No, he gave an extension to Damian Williams, so he doesn't want to sound like an imbecile just handing out money. He's not an imbecile, because Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a freaking fantastic running back who just set the SEC record in the last decade for receptions out of the backfield. Can be used in the slot, can be used out wide. I don't know. Look, I understand last year that it was LaShawn McCoy and Damian Williams and Darrell Williams. What if there was one talent that was just superior to all of them? And I think the Chiefs have it. And in that case, just force feed them the football. And I think they might.
Yeah, we are differing. I still think Damian Williams is around, at least as a 2-down grinder. As Evan Silva always notes, he's the best wheel route runner among running backs in the league. However, we know that Edwards-Helaire's strength is, as you said, being one of the best pass-catching backs of the last decade. So he has that role shored up from day one, and targets and receptions at that position is how you reach your ceiling and how you spike upside at that position. So it does make sense, but again, I don't agree with all of these players. I should mention that. I just took the consensus and wrote about it. However, I do agree that I think Damian Williams has value still. I know it's crazy, but I think he's still there, man.
He has value.
Carries.
He has value, but I would just say that Clyde Edwards, each one can have singular value as well, Yeah. And this is the type of offense that can support positive game scripts, great leads. How many games did Patrick Mahomes miss last year? 3? What if he has those 3 and they're just in a better offensive situation this year for the entire year?
I'll do one more devil's advocate, though, on Clyde, where we kind of asked this question with Lamar Jackson last year. And, how much is Lamar Jackson really throwing to running backs? And, the really big Kareem Hunt season was with Alex Smith, not True. Patrick Mahomes. And if Clyde – to me, I wouldn't be shocked if Clyde wasn't ready on early downs. And, if he's not catching 5 passes a game – it's going to be very difficult for him to live up to that ADP. So, I'm just not going to – the Chiefs are always going to have a great screen game. So I'm just not convinced. I agree with the faders.
It's a great point, Pat.
But you made another great point, Josh, where he is at the hinge point at running back. Where
right.
Every one of these guys is going to have serious questions. And Clyde's, are pretty appealing compared to some of the guys he's around. When you – don't overthink a first-round pick being in an Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes offense.
And I want to reiterate some names above him because, running back 10 to running back 15 where he is, it's Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, Miles Sanders, Kenyon Drake, and Leonard Fournette. I agree if you want to take 4 of those names above him, but I'm not taking Leonard Fournette over Clyde Edwards-Helaire. No,
I knew which one you were talking about. Don't worry.
You're going to draft a guy that is in a new offense – I don't know. Are we talking about him? I don't want to go into Leonard.
Yeah, we're talking about
Fournette
a bit.
actually.
Yeah. Okay, we will get to him later on.
Save your anger for a few minutes. Yeah.
But again, when you nail rookies and you achieve tremendous value at the end of the season versus where they were drafted, that's league winning potential. And that's okay. You don't have to draft these guys in round 9 for them to hit value. You can draft them at the end of round 2 and still be a top 5 running back at the end of the year. Not saying that's for sure, but I think the potential is there and the ceiling is there in this offense. Sorry, I went on and on and on.
It's okay.
I won't do that as much moving forward. All right.
It's understandable.
Number 2, Daigle, I'll swing this to you after I say Austin Hooper, the new tight end for the Cleveland Browns. He's being drafted as a tight end 10 and number 75 overall. He's obviously coming off a super productive time with the Atlanta Falcons, and we know Kevin Stefanski with the Browns uses plenty of 2 tight end sets like he did in Minnesota, but your group has some issues with his current ADP.
He did not lead in total points, obviously, but he led in polls, and he was on 8 of 12 players' polls when they sent in points. And the fact is, as they noted, that he's being drafted as if he's still in Atlanta's offense, whereas he's reasonably the 4th receiver on this team behind Beckham, Landry, and I guess you can sprinkle in Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. Either way, the fact is you have to fight to be the 3rd receiver, and that's a mess because that's not what he was doing in Atlanta. So he was always one of my players I didn't want to touch anyways. I think he's better on field product for the Browns than in fantasy, but just for him to come through as number 2 and see that mostly everyone else is also avoiding him was reassuring.
I'll say I agree with Austin Hooper as a fade, but he's kind of been in that tight end 10 to 12 range. And to me, that's mostly appropriate. I mean, the main problem for me with Austin Hooper and the Browns right now is I don't really know what kind of offense Kevin Stefanski is going to run. Gary Kubiak over the years, obviously a Shanahan disciple, they haven't been like a tight end avoid offenses for fantasy, but I don't know if Kevin Stefanski is really going to run a Gary Kubiak, Shanahan offense. He's just kind of an open book. I don't know how much of last year's Stefanski identity was his or Mike Zimmer's. And but I will say Austin Hooper, put up those numbers in only 13 games. He would have had an even bigger season if he hadn't missed 3 games. And he's at a part of a board where I think people are baking in a somewhat responsible fade. If you want to fade him further, though, he's not someone I'm going to bang the table for. I mean, it's just Austin Hooper. And certainly you're making a floor-based pick, I feel like, if you take him with a very uncertain ceiling. And we don't even quite know how high the floor is. Yeah,
sorry to try to cut you off there, but I was going to make the exact same point where, Austin Hooper isn't one of these types who's going to dominate the intermediate area. He's certainly not going to create big plays for you. And he's being drafted around players like that probably are. And Jared Cook, Mike Gesicki, maybe even Hayden Hurst, Noah Fant, obviously. He's kind of at that hinge point for tight ends as well, because above him, obviously, you have the unknown in Rob Gronkowski. You also have Hunter Henry and Evan Ingram, Tyler Higbee. Yeah, I take all those over Austin Hooper. But the other point you made, Pat, is a great one, where what was the Mike Zimmer influence or Gary Kubiak influence on the Kevin Stefanski last year? Because his top tight end in 2019 was Kyle Rudolph, who finished as the tight end 14 last year with just 39 reception, 367 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Do we think that Austin Hooper is going to be much better than that? I don't know. I don't know that answer. And that's still position right now, Daigle, where I either want like George Kittle or Travis Kelce, or I really want to wait and try to figure it out with one of these later round tight ends and not one here at this tight end gray mark, tight end 10 gray mark.
That's actually what I've started doing post-draft. Like I definitely didn't hate Mike Gesicki in fantasy, but I wasn't as high a proponent of him as most other players. But the more I look at it, and we discussed this last episode with Pat, just that tight end 6 through 10, 11 range has so many question marks. It's like that for me, it's become, okay, why don't I just take Gesicki as basically a wide receiver, not a tight end, and hope for the best, or just wait and stack up with Blake Jarwin and Chris Herndon, who are guys I truly believe in this year. So that's kind of been more my approach now as we move along here in the offseason.
And let me throw out – yeah, go ahead, Pat.
I'm going to say I'm taking Mike Gesicki over Austin Hooper. Maybe not 10 times out of 10, but 8 or 9 times out of 10, I'm going to be doing that.
I mentioned those 2 names, obviously, in Kelce and Kittle, and then I was going to wait. I would also like to throw in, I will gladly take Evan Ingram in the middle rounds because
I'm actually considering Ingram like the 5, like the big 5. And then 6 is when I get worried.
I put Ingram in at 5, and I'm just not feeling – I took him in our mock draft. I can't – not to sidetrack the podcast. I can't quite figure out what is appropriate with Evan Ingram, but I've been treating him as a top 5 tight end.
Overrating him is appropriate. I do it every year.
It's true.
I thought that this was an interesting comment in your column, Daigle. Brian Holtzkin said his strategy is firmly fading tight ends in their first year with a new team altogether. I was interested to hear more on that, but maybe we can do that later on this offseason. So
a lot of fading tight ends, fading wide receivers in their first year with their teams, and also just outright fading quarterbacks in the first 4 rounds. Like a lot of comments on that.
The third most overrated player in fantasy drafts, overdrafted, I might add, is Leonard Fournette, Jaguars running back, number 14 overall at his position in drafts right now, 26 overall. I will save my spiel, even though I've done it about 3 straight podcasts before this one. John Daigle, I'm kind of surprised he actually is at number 3 and not number 1 or number 2 on this list.
And he only checked in, let's see here, I wrote in the column, 3 points behind Edwards-Helaire, 1 point behind Austin Hooper. So he was right up there. And the fact is, right now, because of, like we discussed on last podcast, 100 targets last year, he's going in the second round as a presumed workhorse, but that's not his role this year. They've said as much. They've signed Chris Thompson, who Jay Gruden loves. They've added Laviska Shenault, who catches most of his production underneath. Leonard Fournette will absolutely not see 100 targets. We'll probably be lucky to see 60 this year. And he's being drafted as a bell cow, and that's just not the case.
I mean, Leonard Fournette, there's so many other red flags, too. I mean, 3 touchdowns and only touchdowns are fluky, but 3 touchdowns on 341 touches is just like unfathomable, like scoring failure. And when it was in concert with, terrible rate stats, like it wasn't really a fluke. And, it's so weird, though. You can see why Leonard Fournette is still being drafted where he is, because like if the season began today, he's going to be amongst the league leaders probably in carries. And it's like, what do you do with that? But the Jaguars have telegraphed all offseason they don't even want him, but they can't get rid of him. So it's just kind of like everyone, the Jaguars are stuck in limbo with Leonard Fournette, and we're kind of stuck in limbo with Leonard Fournette. But I mean, totally working with the theme of the article. I mean, when Leonard Fournette comes on the clock in drafts, I think of all the reasons not to take him. I don't think the reasons to take him. So, yeah, I am a full-on fade of poor old Lenny.
Yeah, 0 shares of Leonard Fournette this offseason, probably from all 3 of us.
Yes.
And do you know what that means? That means he's going to be great in 2020.
Of course, yeah. It's finally coming.
But, I mean, it really is. And sometimes we can just simplify it because we can forget about what they've done in their past because it's a new situation, right? It's with Jay Gruden, who I actually think Jay Gruden's quite good offensive coordinator and what he's done with kind of middling talents in the past. But guess what? Leonard Fournette is a middling talent. We have to forget about him being a top 10 draft pick in the NFL a couple of years ago. He is who he is now. And it's a situation where there's no 5th-year option, that he's certainly not going to get the same target volume and workload volume that he got last year. Chris Thompson involved, you mentioned him. Obviously, you mentioned Shenault. We talked about Raekwon Armstead last week and how he's had some passing down work as well. Again, I mentioned in Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's being drafted right above Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And after that, it's like Todd Gurley. I'd rather have a broken Todd Gurley. I'd rather have a split-time Melvin Gordon. I'd rather have Le'Veon Bell in that Jets offense. Heck, I'll even go Chris Carson with the Seahawks. I'm so out on Leonard Fournette, and maybe it comes back to bite me, but it's just a blind spot for me this year.
So we just need more information, which is kind of weird because we have so much information. And
it's bad.
Yeah, we don't have the final story. The Jaguars, I still would not be shocked if the season began with Leonard Fournette getting 16 to 20 carries.
He's also a super volume dependent player, right, Daigle? Who on a team that we don't expect to be good at all this year. And so if they're going to be working in negative game scripts, how he's going to be able to keep up with the same pace that he got last year in running volume when we already expect his passing down volume not to be there this year.
And why can't it be Raekwon Armstead? Why can't
exactly
it be who performed admirably in the lone spot start and off the bench as a pass catching back last year? So yeah, that's who I've actually been taking in the later rounds with my fingers crossed that he somehow wins the job or Fournette's just traded for like a 7th round pick or whatever he's valued at now.
And I know that in fantasy drafts, like you have to select uncomfortable situations. unknown situations. But I would rather do that with ones that like have positivity attached to them and not negativity. Like the positivity of Jonathan Taylor being drafted in the second round to the Colts, but that's still uncertain, right? That's fine with me. Devin Singletary, and that, he was a positive last year, but Zach Moss, that's still good. That's a positive. The Leonard Fournette uncertainty is all negative. And that's just something that I try to avoid at all costs when entering these fantasy drafts. But again, who knows? I can always be wrong. All right, number 4, Lamar Jackson. Yes, last year's league winner landed on this list of most overdrafted players in fantasy football right now. He's obviously going as the quarterback 1 overall, but Daigle, I think the most important comment on this is that it's his overall pick, right? It's the 21st overall selection. And that's where people are having an issue, and obviously not Lamar Jackson, the fantasy football star, or the talent.
Yeah, it's simply regression on a league high, ridiculous number, 9% touchdown rate, and that just falling backwards in year 2 as a full-time starter. He's going currently in the second round, and I think people would maybe be comfortable in the third round, but the fact is you can't get him there. And Mahomes, remember, like we talk about Jackson's floor being unrivaled, but even in Mahomes' last 4 games last year, 3 playoff games included, he did have at least 7 carries in all 4 games. So Mahomes also has a baked-in rushing floor that we could see this upcoming year. And that's like if he stays healthy for 16 games as well. So there's a path not only for Mahomes, an easy one, to finish as the QB1 overall, but just to also be more of a value at a slightly lower ADP than Jackson, who's pretty absurd in the second round right now.
Yeah, quarterback, I feel like this year is like for the first time in several years and like a little less deep than it was the prior year. But it's still by far the deepest position. And, we have a 1-to-1 comparison with Lamar Jackson. How should we draft a quarterback that just had an historic, basically unparalleled season? Because, this was Patrick Mahomes last year. And then, the injury hurt, of course, but we saw the expected regression. And that doesn't mean no one's ever guaranteed to regress, of course. Lamar Jackson's a special player. Maybe he won't regress. Maybe he'll set the quarterback rushing record for the second straight year. But regression is by far the most likely outcome. And I completely agree with John. There's really not – Lamar's not in a tier all by himself. Mahomes is still right there in that tier with him to me. And I just still see no reason to take a quarterback in the second round. So
yeah, that's what it comes down to, Pat. Because, again, this isn't a discussion on necessarily talent at all, even though 40 touchdowns is not sticky. But it's a comment on landing last year's Lamar Jackson. The year before's Patrick Mahomes is the way you unlock your fantasy draft. That is how you win your fantasy league. Drafting one of those quarterbacks after quarterback 6, quarterback 7, even into the early 10s or teens, that's how you unlock everything. So my question to you guys is, who is that this year? Because we have Josh Allen at quarterback 7. I know Pat.
Say delete the podcast if anyone says Josh Allen.
I know Pat ranks him much lower than that, but you have the names of Matt Ryan at quarterback 9, Aaron Rodgers at quarterback 11. And if I had to say who I think might be that league winner this year among the quarterbacks you take outside the top 10, it's Carson Wentz at quarterback 12.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, it's John's turn to spot. You go, John.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and remember in these high-stakes leagues, they know how to draft. Everyone pretty much waits until round 10s or later to grab a quarterback. So guys like Carson Wentz and Matt Stafford, despite me personally having them top 10 overall, they're not going till the 11th or 12th round. And that's just how the great players draft. Having said that, if you want super late rounds, I like Gardner Minshew. Just given his rushing floor, 5 carries per game in his 9 starts, or his starts for Nick Foles. I like Teddy Bridgewater a lot, who I think is still being undervalued as a strong quarterback 2, but being valued as a quarterback 3. And those are some of my late round guys who I think will be forced to throw often because their defenses are so poor.
I was going to say Jarrett Stidham as a joke, but
y'all are wild right now. I don't know what's going on. We just had a Twilight Zone moment here.
What's wrong with Teddy Bridgewater and Gardner Minshew?
Well, but I'm talking about potential league winners, only single quarterback teams that your office league does.
It's Carson Wentz. You're correct there. And the other option, we have to embrace it. It's Tom Brady. Tom Brady with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the world's deepest supporting cast. So you're not going to get a Lamar Jackson or Pat Mahomes season. There's no obvious Lamar Jackson or Pat. Maybe if Daniel Jones got good, he could do that, but that's not going to happen.
I could see Carson Wentz doing it, Pat. I could see Carson Wentz.
I could see Carson Wentz doing it too. I
Totally.
still think Teddy Bridgewater's a good answer.
I'm talking about like a completely unknown commodity, kind of.
Right.
I mean, if the simulation wanted to get really crazy, I mean, maybe Drew Lock, but that's not happening.
Oh, Ben Roethlisberger staying healthy as well.
I was gonna say that's a big one.
Roethlisberger's quarterback 17. I mean, he didn't make this list, but Kyler Murray at quarterback 3 is quite a jump. I mean, I love it. I love Kyler's talent. I think we are still not giving him enough credit for how good his rookie season was, but that's still an area where, I mean, he's being drafted at overall 45 right now as the quarterback 3. That's just too rich for me to even select a quarterback.
I mean, he was the QB 8 last year against the 4th toughest schedule in the league.
I love him. I love him.
I don't know if QB3 is too high. Like it's QB3 between him and Dak, and that's the conversation.
But Pat, I mean, you had him on 95% of your rosters last year. You were taking Kyler Murray as like the 11th or 12th overall quarterback, right?
It was probably a little higher than that. And I didn't win a ton of leagues last year. So let's just be real. I've not hopped off the train though. I'll make. No,
you shouldn't. He was unbelievable, and it's only gotten better around him. Okay.
Josh, you asked about I spent a lot of time trying to trade for Kyler Murray in the Madden Dynasty, and they were not giving him up. It was very frustrating.
Pat, we have agreed that you have your minute before the show starts, but once the show starts, at least here on YouTube, the Madden Dynasty might not make it into the.
All I'm going to say is, why would the Arizona Cardinals not want the quarterback who had just thrown for the most yards in league history and Kirk Cousins? I don't get it.
Also, you're doing it wrong. You got to be like Ian and play college football 14 and actually wait until you have Kyler Murray with the Aggies and then win the Heisman with him.
One of my favorite games of all time. So Ian's living right.
Let's move on. Number 5 most overdrafted player, according to the professional fantasy players, basically, that John Daigle polled. Mike Evans, wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, being drafted as wide receiver 7 right now, 24 overall. Daigle, I don't get this one at all. Because Mike Evans, in his first 6-7 seasons in the NFL, has 1,000 yards in every single year. He's one of the most consistent wide receivers across the league. He did it last year and only playing 13 games, and he is a upgrade at quarterback from a efficiency standpoint this season.
The Buccaneers led every team in points divvied out to different players. Rob Gronkowski received 11 points, Tom Brady 9, Keyshawn Vaughn 4, Ronald Jones 2, Chris Godwin 1, and then Evans, which ranked the highest. So my thoughts were gathering their thoughts were, one, the Bucs are overrated in general, and that makes sense. That means the best players, the most successful players in fantasy right now are betting against Tom Brady being dragged down by a surrounding cast and just saying, hey, a 43-year-old can't play good football anymore, which is a reasonable assessment to make. And then 2, I do think you have to pick one between Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. I don't think they can support 2 top 12 wide receivers again without Jameis Winston. And I myself am also picking Chris Godwin among the 2.
And Pat, before you say anything, it's worth mentioning that Chris Godwin is wide receiver 6, just 1 spot ahead of Mike Evans right now. So you're with many people, Daigle, where they do have to pick between the 2 at that spot.
I mean, people are just betting against uncertainty, which is completely understandable. I mean, but Tom Brady has had plenty of years where he supported a number of elite fantasy options. We just don't know what this offense is going to look like. I mean, I will say, as much as I did not enjoy watching Tom Brady attempt deep balls last year, I mean, most of the sites with advanced metrics still rated him as a pretty solid deep ball thrower. Bruce Arians has claimed he's a better fit for his offense than people think. And, even a decrepit Mike Evans is the kind of target where even a decrepit Tom Brady should be, in theory, be able to still hit Mike Evans. But I agree. I mean, I've been gun shy on just about every buck when I'm drafting too. And it's just, we just don't know. I think someone's going to go wild. I think someone's still going to go wild, but we just don't know who it's going to be. And I might lead to Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin fits latter-day Tom Brady's skill set better than Mike Evans does. And if I had to bet, I would bet on Chris Godwin being the one who goes wild.
Yeah, let's walk down that narrative street, right? Because, look, I understand they added Rob Gronkowski, and maybe a pass catching back more so in Keyshawn Vaughn. But again, I want to reiterate, this is a player who in 13 games last season got 1,000 yards. You know, he gets 3 extra games, hopefully, this year. And I understand that they're not going to be working in as many negative game scripts as they were last year. And, you know, Jameis isn't going to be closing his eyes and launching the football down the field. Oh, I guess he didn't even have to close his eyes last year.
You couldn't see anyway.
But, Daigle, don't you think that there's something to the fact that Mike Evans, he's not going to bomb, you know? Like, he's not going to just plummet. He's not going to anchor. Like, what, at worst, he gets you 850, 900 yards, 6 touchdowns, 7 touchdowns? That would not be a disaster. I mean, I understand that after him, you might have some players who might finish in the top 3 among wide receivers, top 4 wide receivers, like Kenny Galladay, Odell Beckham, Juju Smith-Schuster. Like, those are all the potential, like, ceiling players. But on some level, I understand safe in this department. And I don't know if there's a more safe offense, even though it's completely new, basically, than with Tom Brady associated to you as your quarterback.
For the record, I want to be wrong about Mike Evans. Like, we know he's the better talent than Chris Godwin. They're both amazing players. But Mike Evans is like an elite player that, like DeAndre Hopkins, would arguably mesh with any quarterback. So maybe that is the argument. I just made it against myself with Tom Brady. I just think you have to pick one. And I think Chris Godwin's safer from the slot, a known spot in Bruce Arians' offense, whether it was T.Y. Hilton or Larry Fitzgerald, or John Brown at times, who has thrived historically with Arians. And I think it's an edge for bigger tournaments, honestly, if you do want to wait on Mike Evans, because he is falling. Like, his ADP is wide receiver 7, as you mentioned, but he's still seeming to fall. So maybe it is an edge just to wait out Chris Godwin and instead grab Evans around later.
Just as the preview. Go ahead, Pat.
Final point is we have data points on Bruce Arians with old quarterbacks on their last leg. He's still very aggressive. We can't forget the Carson Palmer years. It's like Bruce Arians will not be reining in the offense. Like, this is still going to be like pedal to the metal for Bruce Arians and the Bucs.
Just as a little preview for our draft guide, which will be on newsstands this summer, I have Mike Evans ranked the highest of the Rotoworld crew, so I'll be writing about him in said draft guide. All right. Let's move on. Number 6 most overdrafted player in fantasy football this year, Aaron Jones, running back for the Green Bay Packers, going right now as running back 10 overall, which also means he's the number 16. Yes, 16 overall selection. Daigle, that is rich.
And we knew it coming, right? Like 19 total touchdowns, third most, not just last year, but third most in franchise history. Think about how long Madison, Wisconsin has been around just with like neighborhoods and a strip club at the corner. Nothing else to do. But Aaron Jones comes in, 19 touchdowns, third most in franchise history. And they add A.J. Dillon. They reportedly want to go to a quote-unquote run-oriented attack more and more as Matt LaFleur tries to become the 49ers offense. So it was something I knew was going to happen, especially since he's going in that 10 to 14 range, depending on where you rank him among the other RB1s. So, yeah, it wasn't a shock at all to see Aaron Jones come on this list.
Daigle, can we dive into that Madison, Wisconsin comment? Have you been to Madison, Wisconsin?
I've been to Madison, Wisconsin, yeah.
It's large.
I've not been to the corner. I'm not attesting to that. I'm just saying I know what is in Madison, Wisconsin.
It's a wonderful place. At least I was there in the summer. I mean, it was a great place. I don't know. You didn't like it.
I've heard Madison's a nice college town, is what I've heard.
I really liked it. Okay. Go ahead, Pat.
I got to say, with Aaron Jones, you said it's rich at 15 or 16, and it is, but it shouldn't be. I mean, Aaron Jones is a special player who keeps rendering committees obsolete, but it is rich because the Packers just don't care. They are so intent on making this a committee. A.J. Dillon is now the highest drafted running back on the roster, and they're just not going to let Aaron Jones be as the Aaron Jones should be. So I agree. He's a very tough rank this offseason because we know he's a special player. He just had a special season, but we know they don't want to employ him that way. So it's a tough, unfortunate rank, but I agree with fading him too.
Right now he's going behind Nick Chubb and Josh Jacobs and ahead of the likes of Austin Eckler and Miles Sanders and Kenyon Drake. Personally, I would take Miles Sanders over Aaron Jones right now just because of the situation. What's up,
also, Dave? No one's talking about it. Like, this is the last year of Aaron Jones' deal, and he's only due $2.1 million. I honestly don't envision him as a player they re-sign, especially after drafting A.J. Dillon. But what if he holds out? And plus, again, being the last year of his deal, what if they just don't give him as much work? And he only received those 285 touches because Jamal Williams was constantly banged up. Jamal Williams was an integral part of the game plan along with Jones whenever they were healthy together. So you also have to bank on Williams being injured again all year long to see Jones as a RB 10 through 12, an RB 1. And it's just a mess.
Yeah. At some point we have to take what teams are telling us as them being honest with us. And you mentioned it, no new deal for Aaron Jones at the moment. And they go out and select another running back in round 2. I mean, these teams are honest through free agency and they're honest through the draft. We have to accept it sometimes. All right. Number 7, Darren Waller, who was a fantasy darling last year in the teens, around like tight end 17, I believe. But this year he's going as tight end 5, number 40 overall. I completely understand where your crew is coming from here, John Daigle.
They added Jason Witten, Nelson Aguilar, Henry Ruggs, Brian Edwards, Foster Moreau coming back healthy, Hunter Renfrow still around. It's such a much more competitive target tree than last year. And Waller is a tremendous player and was the breakout player of 2019. But this year, it just ain't it. I'm sorry. It's just not it.
Yeah, I can't really lay it out any better than you. A complete industry-wide success story last year, who just has so much target competition now. It could be like a mid-season quarterback change. So this is very hard to see how he's not gonna pay dividends as the tight end 5. It's just not gonna happen.
Yeah, it was a bottom 5 wide receiver group last year for Derek Carr and then the Oakland Raiders. But then you go out and you add Brian Edwards. You obviously had Henry Ruggs in round 1. Hunter Renfrow will be more involved for most of the season. Tyrell Williams had some nice numbers when given opportunities, and they just go out.
He was hurt all year too. That's another thing. Tyrell Williams was hurt all year. He played injured all year.
One of the quotes, Daigle, in your piece, to say I don't expect a repeat of his 117 target performance last season is an understatement. I think we're in total agreement here. I'll mention the other tight ends going around him. Above him, again, at tight end 5, Mark Andrews is tight end 3, Zach Ertz is tight end 4, and after him, Tyler Higbee, Evan Ingram, Hunter Henry. Again, I'm going with Evan Ingram in that situation as many times as possible. Okay, moving on. Number 8, most overdrafted player in fantasy football this year, Courtland Sutton, Broncos wide receiver. He's being drafted as a wide receiver 18 right now, number 47 overall. Daigle, he was incredible last year. 72 catches, over 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns. But what fascinated me, Daigle, was that only placed him at the end of the season as wide receiver 19. And now he's being drafted ahead of that number as the wide receiver 18.
And I will bang this drum throughout the offseason. It's because Drew Lock made the offense worse. In Drew Lock's 5 starts, Courtland Sutton averaged only 7 yards per target. He finished inside the top 34 wide receivers only once, and that was in Drew Lock's spiked game against the Chargers. It was a disaster, honestly, and yet he still finished top 20 because he was supported by Joe Flacco and Brendan Allen prior to Lock's 5 starts. So I could feel the pain coming from the words of everyone who wrote it because everyone loves the player. Courtland Sutton is so much fun to watch, but with all the new mouths to feed as well, it's a disastrous situation to be in.
There's a lot to unpack here with Courtland Sutton, who has kind of been like DeAndre Hopkins in that he's had success with every quarterback he's ever played with, and all of them have been terrible to this point in time. I will say, the main thing for me isn't that he struggled with Drew Lock down the stretch last year. It is more the target competition. But the people they added, signals a complete change in offensive philosophy. The Broncos had one of the most retrograde offenses in recent memory last year. They've made it clear the offense will be opened up this year. So I think there's kind of just more variables at play than maybe meet the eye. And then Drew Lock is a variable. The new target competition is a variable. But also the new offense is a variable. And to me, he's just a special player. He's already just kind of one of those beastly wide receivers in the league. And I really don't feel good about letting Courtland Sutton drop all the way to wide receiver 18. And this is maybe the first one on the list where I just kind of straight up don't agree. And
nice.
It's a situation where I'm betting on his talent and a new, far more aggressive scheme.
Wide receiver's loaded. We talk about it all the time. Above him, Juju Smith-Schuster, wide receiver 15, Adam Thielen, wide receiver 16, Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 17. And after him, it's Keenan Allen, it's Robert Woods, it's DK Metcalf. I mean, I'm not going to say there's a cliff after Courtland Sutton, but I think there is a little bit of a drop-off at that position. And correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, maybe just a lack of football has gotten to me. Isn't Pat Shurmur now the OC of the Denver Broncos?
He is.
Right. Yes.
Things have changed. It's not the same offense that they're running last year, right? But, and again, maybe my football memory is fuzzy here, but when Pat Shurmur was in Minnesota, didn't he have two fantastic wide receivers who also put up 1,000 yards each in Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen? Maybe he can do that again here with Drew Lock and obviously Courtland Sutton and maybe Jerry Jeudy as well. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I think there might be enough volume to go around here.
It's a player Pat mentioned, so I actually want to pose an idea, Pat. I would like to bet lunch on Robert Woods, number 20 in your rankings, finishing higher than Courtland Sutton, number 14 in your rankings on the year.
I might as well. It's funny because I like Bob Woods.
And I'm not taking the easy way out because, like, you also have Cooper, DK Metcalf, DJ Shark behind.
I mean, Pat, you literally cannot deny this bet because it's just against your rankings. Like, you basically have to accept this wager.
No, I mean,
I do think it happens anyways. But
those are just random. Like, I just punched in numbers. No, I'll take the bet. Yeah, because I love Courtland Sutton. And I'm a secret, as Josh knows, huge Drew Lock stan. I really want Drew Lock to happen.
It's not a secret.
I don't think he's going to.
It's not a secret what I think about Drew
I really
Lock,
want him to happen badly.
Okay, well, that we have lunch on it. Robert Woods over Courtland Sutton PPR. Got it.
The NBC Sports commissary, as soon as COVID-19 is over.
Josh's salads are waiting for him with eggs and loads of chicken.
There we go. No eggs. No eggs on salads. We're good.
You don't do hard-boiled eggs?
I'm not a hard-boiled egg person.
I eat them straight up sometimes. You don't see it when I show up early.
No, we would kick you out of the office. All right. Moving on up the list just a little bit at number 9 is wide receiver 14. That is A.J. Brown of the Tennessee Titans going as a 38 overall wide receiver. Daigle, you know this because we sat in studio, and I think it was like around week 5 or week 6, maybe even a little bit before then, when A.J. Brown had his rocket ship game against the Atlanta Falcons where he got like so low volume yet was able to singularly make plays that no one else in the field could do. I was screaming. Well, maybe not screaming. I was just raising my voice. But I want him to get 10 targets a game. But he didn't do that last year. He averaged 6.1 targets a game last season with Ryan Tannehill under center, and now we're drafting him as the number 38 overall player, wide receiver 14, ahead of the likes of Juju and Adam Thielen and Calvin Ridley. Again, not getting mad at the talent at all in A.J. Brown because he is potentially a top 10 talent at the position. Just very scared of the volume that he might get in an offense that doesn't want to throw first.
One of only 18 rookies in the last decade to average over 2 yards per route run. The proof is in the pudding, though. His 3 most recent games, those playoff contests, he totaled, not average, totaled 5 catches for 64 yards and no touchdowns. And that's not a detriment of the player. That's the style of offense that they will continue to run. And remember, they have the second easiest projected rushing schedule. Sure, that'll probably change over time. But right now, heading into the season, it lends itself to become another Derrick Henry year, which is worrisome for A.J. Brown.
Yeah, I mean, wide receiver 14 is extraordinarily aggressive. I think we all love A.J. Brown, the player. But so last year he had 1,000 yards. He did that only 52 catches. There had only been 2,000-yard seasons in the entire decade that happened on fewer catches, which shows you a very big play reliant player on low volume. And he's a genuine big play threat, but it's the kind of formula that could easily not repeat this year, and he's going to need at least double the volume. And we all see it we saw with our own eyes. He's a special player, but the role is just too uncertain right now in that offense. For wide receiver 14 is crazy.
I said, and I want to take it back a little bit, that the Titans are a run-first team. I don't think that's the case. I think like every organization out there, they want to pass the football, and then when they get positive game script, they just unleash Derrick Henry on you and just punish you, right? And that's exactly what they did against the Baltimore Ravens in the playoff game. That's what they did in a lot of their wins last year down the stretch. But it's still a team where we are expecting it to be exactly how it was when they were so good last year, when we basically hadn't seen any of those players be that good before. I don't know. I feel like every single time we hedge by saying, and it's true, that we love these players, but we don't want to draft them where they're being drafted. And it's going to eat at me inside that I'm not going to have any shares of A.J. Brown this year of where he's being drafted right now.
Totally
the
fair.
Titans,
I agree.
you just alluded to the Titans are playing one of the lowest margin for error offenses. And when you do rushing volume and pop a shot passing, that is very low margin for error. So it would actually be good for A.J. Brown if the Titans offense kind of went off the rails and they had to pass a lot more. But I don't know. I think we're all in agreement on we love the player. You know, the situation makes us too uncertain.
What does Tyler Lockett got to do to like be drafted according to where his value and his talent matches? He's being drafted as the wide receiver 23 right now, number 65 overall. What's a guy got to do, John Daigle?
Get more than one target per game.
I don't know.
I'm really glad Tyler Lockett does not have access to the Rotoworld Slack. There may have been some Tyler Lockett anger down the stretch.
You want to talk about run first offense. Like that's what drags him down.
Sure,
he got Wally pipped. DK Metcalf's just better, unfortunately.
No,
right?
Tyler Lockett's more efficient than DK Metcalf. But it's just the fact that he has, like Mike Evans, like a poor man's Mike Evans, he has spiked weeks because it genuinely just depends on whether Pete Carroll feels like cooking that Sunday or not.
All right, number 10 was a tie. I'll give the first half to you, Daigle, then the second half to Pat.
Sure.
Devin Singletary, Bills running back. He's being drafted as the running back 21 right now, 46 overall. Daigle, that's yours. And then Pat, we'll switch over to you. DeAndre Hopkins is also a tie at number 10. Wide receiver 3 in drafts right now, number 11 overall. Daigle, go first.
Frank Gore's absence does vacate 166 carries and team high 11 carries inside the 5-yard line, but those fruitful reps aren't going to Devin Singletary after the team drafted big bruising goal line back Zach Moss. And that's the issue, is that what the role that pays off for running backs is pretty much not going to Devin Singletary, which is why he's considered overrated in this piece.
I got to add to Devin Singletary. I just said the Bills never seemed fully sold on him down the stretch last year, even as the bigger role kind of like organically emerged. And, you know, the Zach Moss has kind of confirmed that they don't view him as like a true, you know, lead every down back. And DeAndre, I'm curious of John's thoughts on DeAndre Hopkins. You know, I don't really worry about a talent like DeAndre Hopkins changing teams. And now he's going to an offense with a much more creative play designer in Cliff Kingsbury than Bill O'Brien. You know, an offense that might actually scheme DeAndre Hopkins into space and not make him do all the work on contested catches over and over again. And just a player the Cardinals badly needed. You know, the Cardinals just didn't have the wide receiver personnel they needed last year to kind of run the offense the way Cliff Kingsbury wanted to. They had the bodies, but they just kind of lacked the high-end talent at receiver with an aging Larry Fitzgerald and kind of an uncertain Christian Kirk. And I think the Cardinals are ready to just go wild with DeAndre Hopkins and feed him an unbelievable amount of targets. And I'm completely comfortable with DeAndre Hopkins' ADP.
Wow.
The one question I continue to pose is who trumps DeAndre Hopkins for wide receiver 5 overall if it's not him? Is it like a guy like Kenny Golladay, Adam Thielen? The list goes on and on.
Well, I think there's a drastic difference between wide receiver 5 and wide receiver 3 because, you know, I'm finding places where he's wide receiver 5 and wide receiver 3 because DeAndre Hopkins on this list is wide receiver 3, and that's ahead of Tyreek Hill and Julio Jones. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't take him above Tyreek Hill and Julio Jones, would you?
No, and I haven't been. No.
Right. I don't understand at all, like, why someone would take DeAndre Hopkins over Tyreek Hill.
And again, like, yes, Kyler Murray was one of the most accurate deep ball passers last year. The issue is that they only went downfield, or he only went downfield in 11% of his attempts, and which is bottom of the league. And I think that wasn't because he doesn't want to throw deep. I think it was because they literally did not have the players to throw deep.
Dude,
as Hopkins gives you that.
Yeah, he was throwing to Damiere Byrd, Keyshawn Johnson. Both had over 40 targets last year.
Yeah.
Pharaoh Cooper had 33 targets last year. I bet we see 3 Arizona Cardinals this year with over 90 targets. I would give DeAndre Hopkins over 100. I would give Christian Kirk over 100. And I would say Larry Fitzgerald's in that realm of 100 to 90, something in that range. But, I mean, this is a team that had a good offense in many cases with – wide receivers that some, like, I don't even think are on rosters. I mean, Pharaoh Cooper is going to get cut before the Panther season starts almost certainly. Like, these are training camp talents that he was throwing the football to, and it's an instant upgrade. And while I said I would take Tyreek Hill and Julio Jones over DeAndre Hopkins, that's not to say DeAndre Hopkins isn't a bankable type of talent in your fantasy drafts. I think he's awesome. I'm just uncertain a little bit as the wide receiver 3 mark, which is really what we're discussing here.
And if Hopkins can support Tom Savage and Brandon Whedon, like, it makes sense. He can support King Kyler.
Yep.
He's the perfect hybrid. He's a volume monster and a big play threat. And you guys both said, I mean, the Cardinals aggressively addressed an obvious weakness with him. And I think we're going to get a vintage nuke season this year.
All right, guys, that's going to do it. Daigle, again, love the column. It was fantastic. Everyone out there, go and check it out. Again, these were the most overrated and overdrafted players in fantasy football right now, according to a group of 12 high-stakes fantasy players that John Daigle polled. Cool? Cool.
Works for me. And you can find it quickly just if you want to Google consensus top 10 fades Rotoworld. It's right there. And keep the, as Josh I'm sure is about to say, ratings and reviews coming in, because we've had some more since last week.
I appreciate all of you for doing that. You can check us out every day on NBCSN at 11:40 Eastern on weekdays. Again, we'll be back on Tuesday evening with another episode of this very podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review. Tell one friend, most importantly, buy those Hawaiian shirts. And we will talk to you all soon. Up the Villa.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.